sometimes, depending on your project, you may be spawning in lots of actors or having certain things that are visible or invisible, which might then end up blocking some other interaction. I wanted to use my mouse position to be able to give me some feedback on a debug HUD. So you'll see that as I'm rolling over, I'm getting the actor and the component of that actor. So here, this black sphere here is a sphere on its own. The central column with the three shapes in is all within one actor. So obviously my hit, I have a line trace from my mouse position projecting forwards into the world. So I've got the debug red square on. You'll see that as I'm moving my mouse up and down, the information isn't updating because this outer box is the component it's hitting first. What I've done is I've also added the ability to remove the component that I'm currently hitting and then add that to a list. So you can see that the cone is actor multi-comp, as was the outer box. When I come here, I have actor multi-comp, actor multi-comp. So those three components are all part of the same actor. But I've created this way of, when I press X on the keyboard, what I'm deleting gets added. If there are a few things that are blocking my interaction, I know the order at which those blocks are happening. So it just gives me a kind of shopping list to go through and either destroy the component or change the collision setting or scale it to 0 or whatever techniques I employ. Now, one thing you'll note is that when you have components or actors set to hidden, so when visibility is set to false, depending on their collision settings, can still block a line trace. So here I've got this line trace under the mouse, but I've created debug tools in a similar way for VR, where I'm just kind of getting an understanding of what I'm hitting. Now, one thing that is part of my central column actor, which we've nearly completely destroyed, is also a collision volume. Now, that collision volume has got block all on it. If it was set to overlap, then this line trace would just go straight through and I wouldn't get any return result because it isn't blocking. So this is all about what is being blocked, and that's what this debug tool shows me. Okay, let's dive in to the blueprints. So let's look at the component parts here in our debug HUD folder. So I've got three widgets. I've got the main widget, which is full screen. We'll go into that in a moment. But then I have two smaller widgets which do two different jobs. So my child widget is the widget that tracks my mouse position and updates on tick. So I'm getting a kind of live update as to where that point on the screen projected forward and the actor and the component of that actor that's being hit by the line trace. So this is just created with a horizontal box. It's got a vertical line, and then I've got three lines of text. They're all variables, and then each of those I have set up just to demo that we've got an actor name, component name, and for example, we could be pulling in an index number. But you know, this debug tool can be developed or evolved to give you all sorts of other bits of feedback based on the actors that you are rolling over. So this just gives you a kind of quick idea of what we're doing. So each of those variables is exposed on spawn, and that's important, and instance editable. So looking at our list item, so our list item is purely that, the little white line vertical, then that text box is bound to a variable called list item. And that's the only thing that is in that. Again, that variable is instance editable and exposed on spawn. So now looking at the meat of the widget system. So if we come to our main HUD, I have a vertical box here, which is the only thing that's within the canvas panel. and everything else is in the graph. So a couple of things. So if you've watched some of my other widget videos, you'll know about the game instance. If you don't, I encourage you to watch that video. So what we're doing here is we're writing a reference of ourselves, the debug HUD UMG, to a object reference in the game instance, because we are accessing that later. Now we're creating the child widget, which is the widget that follows my mouse position. We're not actually using the exposed. We are using the exposed for the list item here. So I've just got into the habit of exposing it so that it's there should I need it. After creating that child widget, we are just promoting that to a local variable and then adding that child widget as a child to the canvas panel, which is the canvas panel of our main widget. Okay. Now on tick, this is where our line trace from our mouse position on the screen looks to see if it's hitting an object in the world, an actor in the world specifically. So on event tick, we get our player controller. We convert mouse location to world space, and I've just put a ridiculous figure in here. It doesn't need to be quite that long, but in effect that's the distance in Unreal units that we're projecting forward from the mouse position on screen. So our start for our line trace just needs to be our world location from our convert mouse location to world space node, but we're then adding our world direction to that to get our end position. So this is the same as a forward vector, and this unit is 1 in the direction that it's facing, but when we multiply that by an integer or a float or whatever, then that's what the distance becomes. So we then have to take our start position, because that's effectively our origin as the player, and then project forward from that point. Hence we are adding that distance to our current location. So the trace channel I'm using is visibility. I have got the debug type on, which is just that little red square that was on the screen. So now I'm setting the out hit actor as a local variable, the same with the out hit component, just so that I've got them there. I'm using them up here, I believe, somewhere. Am I using that in the end? Oh, I know where I'm using them. I'm using them at the end. Oh, I don't think I'm using them anymore at all. In fact, let me just check. No, I can get rid of those. It'll still work. So, ignore that. We don't need it because I repurposed these here. So we're still taking our out hit it actor and our out hit it component, and that will make sense in a moment. But to get the widget following the mouse position on screen, we simply get the mouse position on viewport. Now I've added an offset of 30 units, screen units, so 30 pixels, not world units, on the X, so that my text doesn't hit right under the mouse. I've got a little gap from the mouse before my widget is displayed. If I hadn't added an offset, then the anchor position of the widget would appear under my mouse. So just so it's not distracting to me, I've just offset it here. Now we get our child widget, which is what we promoted here after creating the widget, and we have to slot as canvas slot before setting the position. Target is canvas panel slot. So the child widget, which is a widget, goes into a slot as canvas slot, and then we set the position, which we are getting the mouse position and adding an offset. So because that is happening on tick, as I move my mouse around the screen, it's constantly updating. Now, child widget So we didn't use the exposed variables, but we're now accessing those three variables. So from our local variable object reference of the child widget, we're accessing and setting the actor variable, the component variable, and the index. We'll look at that in a moment. So that in effect is updating on tick and displaying on the child widget which actors and components are being hit by my mouse. Now this is formatting the text, so taking each of those variables, and then I'm formatting the text where I've just got a colon, got curly brackets, which then gives me and creates a pin. If I put the variable name, any name actually, it's just a kind of reference, in a curly bracket in a format text node, it then gives me a pin, which is a wildcard pin that I can just add anything into. And then that formatted text, I'm creating a list item. And then you'll see here that I have a custom event which is kill current, and that is taking the list item, so that formatted text, and passing that through into the create list item widget, so which is our list item, this widget we looked at earlier. And it's adding that list item widget as a child to the vertical box. And an item gets added every time I run that kill current custom event. Now, to run that custom event, in my player controller, I have a key input under the X key on the keyboard. And because I wrote that earlier reference of self to game instance, I can now access that very easily with get game instance. That's a custom blueprint function library, so please look at the blueprint function library video to get an understanding of how to create that. And then I can just run that kill current custom event. So if we look at our kill current custom event, now this was the problem I was running into. Just destroying the component wasn't working, so that actually is now redundant. What I then decided to do was, rather than kill the component, I've hacked it slightly in that I'm just getting the out hit it component, which is the variable that I deleted before. So let's get that back. We are using it, in fact. Sorry about that. And rather than destroy it, I was just setting the scale to 0, so that it's still in the world, but it's just at a point. So it doesn't kind of exist geometrically, but it exists in the world. So it kind of makes it disappear, basically. So that's a bit of a hack. And then, because this formatted text is also updating on tick, it just gets added to the vertical box. One other thing, of course, to kind of get this visible, I've just got a local Boolean variable that is instance editable, so that in my menu here I've got is debug HUD on, tick yes no, and then I've just put a sequence off my begin play in my setup actor that does the kind of standard, checks to see if that bool is true. If it's true, then of course create the debug HUD widget, create a local variable of that just in case I need it, add it to the viewport, and then standard, get the player controller, set the input mode to game and UI, and then make sure that the show mouse cursor is set to true. And that is it.